Hey everybody, this is Mr. Moffat coming at you here. We're taking a look at APUS History, Topic 3.7, the Articles of Confederation. And so when we cover, the Articles of Confederation, it really is a question of we have spent so much time trying to find a way first to, get equal representation in Britain's parliament, and then so much time trying to gain our independence. We sometimes, forget to, ask, like, well, what kind of government will this new United States of America have? How can you have a government that respects the individual rights of people and prevents against tyranny? How can you do something like that, especially if you are not going to have a monarchy? So this is certainly going to be an experiment that we're going to be seeing this new government attempt. Spoiler alert, not going to work out so well. So, that being said, keep in mind that even before the independence movement, you got to understand that we know that there were a number of colonial governments that existed that had the tradition of electing their own representatives in their own representative chambers. So they already had that going in. But once we officially declare independence, we see each of the 13 colonies now identify themselves as independent states. And that, folks, is where we get the term United States of America. There's a reason that we're not just called America. Initially, this union was a marriage of 13 separate, for lack of a better term, countries that all agreed to work under one roof with one government to kind of bring everyone together. But note, by doing that, they still did not give up their own sovereignty as independent countries. So they will create each their own constitutions. These will be state constitutions that will exist. So keep that in mind. And note, these are folks that very, very, very vigorously guarded this idea of state identity, state power, state sovereignty. Remember, nobody is really calling themselves Americans. These are folks that call themselves Georgians and Virginians and New Yorkers and things like that. So, be mindful of kind of the mindset here with regards to kind of what's going on. But note, once again, there was a desire to unify, and we've seen that happen, and on a number of occasions before true independence, probably most recently the creation of the Continental Congress as a way to unify the colonies and basically serve as the de facto government during the Revolutionary War. Now, focusing some more on these state governments, keep in mind that in these state constitutions, they put together the framework for government and the protected rights that people were to enjoy. And that's going to be significant. At this state level, leaders wanted the people to know exactly what rights were to be enumerated. For example, the right to a jury trial is going to be commonly enumerated. And when I say enumerated, I mean listed, literally numbered, listed on the actual document itself. So there was no question, there was no, wondering whether or not that right existed. In addition to the listing, the enumeration of rights, we also, of course, saw the framework for how these governments are going to be operated. One of the key principles to prevent tyranny, according to the Enlightenment, was the promotion of separation of powers, having the folks that make the laws not be the same ones that enforce the laws, and at the same time not the same ones that interpret what the laws mean. So the idea being is that if you separate these powers out, you reduce any singular person or body from completely dominating government and tyrannizing. So that's going to be a model that we're going to see at the state level. Why am I mentioning so much of what's going on at the state level? Well, if you haven't figured it out yet, what is created first at the state level is going to eventually come to define what we have at the national level with the Constitution. But note, we don't have the Constitution yet. We're working under this thing called the Articles of Confederation. And once again, the Articles of Confederation is the truly first independent plan for government that we're going to be operating under for the United States. And the name itself is very telling. Note, they describe these rules for this union of states as the Articles of Confederation. This is very important, with the idea being is that a confederacy puts the value at the local level of government more than at a national level of government. These are states that did not want to see most of their powers taken away. And so you can see in the name of this document, the name of this government, that these folks, these states, are going to be holding on to as much of their power as they can. You know, for example, New Jersey does not want to give up most of its power to a national government. Massachusetts does not want to give up most of its power to a national government. South Carolina does not want to give up most of its power to a national government. So please keep that in mind. Now, another part of the arrangement was a promise to have some basic, at least initial, understanding of what to do with Western lands. Now, if you remember, we know in the Treaty of Paris that we do get very favorable terms in terms of land all the way out to the Mississippi River. And for the American governments, they were already, even before the Treaty of Paris, making plans on what to do with any possible Western lands that we would be inheriting. So, one of the big concerns was, will some of these states that have Western borders, on the frontier, will they, extend their borders? And will that come at the expense of states that are smaller that do not have those same Western borders on the frontier? So, for example, you can see here that these were some of the initial land claims that many of these states had. As you can see here, mighty Virginia was desiring to extend all the way into what is now modern-day Illinois. You had Georgia seeking to expand all the way into what is now Mississippi. And heck, even Massachusetts right here, small Massachusetts, even though it didn't even technically have a western border, was making claims on territory that would eventually become Michigan and parts of Wisconsin. So there were some concerns about the fate of these western lands, and if each of these states kind of viewed themselves as separate entities, are some going to become disproportionately more powerful than others? This was a concern. And so with a promise to not claim western lands for themselves, that's going to be part of the basis of how this government is going to be agreed upon. So what's the structure of this new government going to be under the Articles? Well, there's going to be a premium put on the notion of equality. These are 13 states that all wanted to have an equal say in this government. Nobody wanted to go into this thing thinking that any one of them was inferior to another one. So we have a singular unicameral legislature with a very simple one vote per state. Didn't matter if you had a lot of people in it like Massachusetts or very few people in it like Georgia, one vote per state. Also note, in order to pass any legislation, it was not going to take a simple majority. It was going to take a supermajority to get legislation passed. 9 out of 13. So you're talking, upwards of 70% or so majority needed to get anything passed. And think about what that means. That means you better have some really broad consensus of support to get anything done. Nobody wanted anything to just be done with a simple, cobbled together majority to possibly tyrannize a large minority. Something else that is going to be interesting in the structure of this is that there will be no executive nor judicial branches. So what does that tell us? That means that the laws that will be passed at the national level from the legislature can only be enforced at the state level. So, keep that in mind. Also, in terms of what these laws mean, how they are to interpret it, how they are to be interpreted, that is also going to be done at the state level. And note, kind of where this is coming from. This is a group of people that have equated strong enforcement power, for example, with tyranny. And if there's going to be an issue of, how to enforce something, well, they're going to decide it's going to be at the state level. They are not going to let a national government tyrannize them in terms of enforcement. So, and think about all that goes into an executive branch, for example. When we say enforcement power, that of course includes the military. So these folks did not want a national redcoat-style army coming in and telling them what to do. Enforcement's going to be done with their militaries, their militias, at their level, the way they want to do it. So each of these 13 states kind of viewed themselves as, applying these laws in their own way. And if you did want to make a permanent change to the framework of government under the Articles, in other words, to actually formally amend it, well, that's going to take unanimous vote, 13 out of 13. And so, once again, the idea being is that if this framework's going to be altered in any way, everybody's got to be on board. Otherwise, it's not going to be applied. So as you can see here, in order to get things done at a national level, it is going to require extraordinary amounts of support. Once again, you are limiting the power of this national government so as to protect freedom and liberty and avoid tyranny. At least that's the mindset behind it. So with that being said, what can this national government do? What are some of its powers? Well, it does have the power to declare war, not that we're in a big hurry to do that. It did have the power to make treaties, and there were still some questions of, what should our relationship be with Britain now that we're independent? Do we maintain our alliance with France? Things like that. Obviously, other diplomatic things like sending ambassadors and things like that are going to be part of it. But also the power to borrow money, which we certainly needed to do because we were not in great shape financially. But note what is not in this new government in terms of power. No power to regulate interstate commerce. So in other words, trade between states. That is not going to be regulated by the national government. That's going to be regulated by the individual states themselves. And so each of these states operated with their own rules economically, and that did include, powers to, for example, coin their own money, power to place tariffs on other states' imported goods, and no national mechanism to, kind of deal with these disputes. Because once again, there is no national judiciary. There is no national enforcement power to try to enforce laws, but of course, the national government doesn't even have the power to regulate it. So these states are really pretty much completely on their own economically, and that's what they wanted. And speaking of, another example of lack of national authority over finances, the new national government had no power to levy taxes. None. Once again, you have to get in the mindset of these individuals. These are folks that view taxation, at least at a national level, they've equated that with tyranny. And they did not want a national government to just, rain down taxes upon them. They're not opposed to the concept of taxation. Obviously, you have to have taxes to have a functioning government, but these taxes are only going to be applied with the individual permission of each state. So what does this mean for the funding of this national government under the Articles? Well, what it means is that they're going to be operating on, in essence, a donation-based system. The national government cannot force any of these states to pay taxes. There's no mechanism to do that. And so anything that the national government can do is purely based on the states being charitable and basically choosing to pay taxes. As you can see, if you are basically operating on a volunteer taxation system, you can imagine how little money this national government is going to have. And once again, that's by design. That's not going to be viewed as a flaw for these folks, because the idea being is the less money you have as a national government, the less power you have as a national government, and the less power you have, the less you are able to be tyrannical. And that's exactly what these states wanted. They wanted to have a government that was not going to tyrannize them. They have been greatly affected by their previous experience with a strong national government. All right, so we'll leave it there for part one. We'll come back for part two to talk about how the Articles are going to be applied and talk about some of its successes, but also its clear failings and why we still do not operate under the Articles at this time. Okay, but until next time, I'll see you later. Bye bye.